And I would love to talk about the Chauvin trial. John brings that up because I have been, and I even was sitting here watching it just now. I have watched every minute of this trial from pretrial motions all the way up through. I'm not complete with today.
There are people that are actually concerned that there is a potential pathway for Chauvin to get off.
It's not, I got to tell you, it's not looking good from my perspective. And I actually come at this with a defense attorney mindset. Like, I am much more of a defense attorney mindset than a prosecutor's mindset. So even though I want this animal to go to prison for the rest of his life, I still do, from watching it, look at the strategy of the defense and what he's doing and how he's, calling, who he's going to call and what his theories are. So he doesn't have much. And really what they're doing is they're going on the causation issue. They can't dispute facts. And that's actually something that makes this kind of simple in some ways. There's no factual dispute. And that's kind of cool. But they're going at this on a causation issue, saying that it wasn't because of Chauvin's knee on his neck, that's not why he died.
Well, that's all they got. That's all they can go on. They can't.
And it's not looking good. I'm watching the expert. So far, the expert that I've watched today is it's annihilating. I mean, I don't. My concern isn't that he's not going to get convicted. I do believe he's going to get convicted. The question is, can they get him on second degree, which I think they can. I do. And so, but really, in my mind, if he gets anything less than 20 years, that city's going to be set on fire. I'm sorry. I mean, in my heart of hearts, I feel like it isn't about whether he gets convicted. It's about how long the sentence is. Well, I personally think he should be in prison forever.
Well, how old is Chauvin? Is he like 40? Is that what he is?
I don't know. Yeah, he's younger than me, I believe.
Yeah, he's not young. He's not old. He's basically, I don't know do you remember how long he's been on the force for?
Long enough. But I honestly, to me, and I know that it is a matter of that they can't prove all these elements beyond a reasonable doubt. But to me, this was much more akin to a first-degree murder than a second-degree murder.
Oh, yeah.
It was very purposeful. It was very thought out. I do recall there was evidence that they knew each other prior to this. Look, all I'm saying is that anything less than 20 years in that city.
So what you're saying is that he was either summoned before by Chauvin or there was a so you're saying they actually did know each other?
My understanding was when this all first went down, within the first few weeks, it came out that they knew each other from some nightclub or some bar where Chauvin did off-duty cop work. Because sometimes they take, jobs, which is normal on the side, and that they knew each other and they weren't strangers. And I still haven't heard confirmation of that either way. But that to me changes the entire story in a different way. And it's just, to me, second degree murder is not enough here for me. And yet that's the best we're going to get. The most he's looking at really, I think, is 40 years. You can get it's like 25 to 40 or something. I forget what it is for second degree murder.
The reality is, but like I said, the reality is if he were to even get 40 years, or if that was even the sentence and he was actually going to
prison. He's not making it 10. No. He's not making it 10 years in prison. That's not the point. If they give him 20 years, he's not going to make it that amount of time. Bad cops in prison is not something that anybody wants to actually, have happen to them. It's really bad. The only thing, actually, I think bad cops are lower on the pecking order than pedophiles. So you don't want to be.
I don't know if I'm going there, but I understand what you're saying.
I'm telling you, he's not going to make it 20 years. There's no way. So, but I just think as far as people not losing it and burning down the city, they're going to need to. It's going to need to be significant.
Forgive me for having to change my lighting. My computer battery was going a little low. So, there we go. That's much better.
Oh, here it is. They worked at a nightclub together. See, that's what I had thought.
I mean, that's real damning evidence as far as.
Except that's not even being brought up. Nobody's even really talking about that. And the reality is that it doesn't really mean anything. And Chauvin's never going to take the stand. So they're never going to be able to question. So no one will ever know. His mindset is going to be extremely hard for them to talk about. They're not going to be able to really address it. And they're not going to want to open that up. And he's definitely not going to take the stand.
No, but I do think very interesting. Farming ganja. Did you see the next message that he put up?
This? Oh, wait.
No. I mean, that's very interesting.
It's not surprising. And honestly, I'm telling you, anything less than 20 years, and I just think that city is, I feel bad for them.
Well,
I do.
Now,
I feel bad for the people there.
Well, now, I mean, the tensions have got to be off the charts now, because now you've got the second murder that just took place with DeJuan Wright and the Minneapolis police, and him getting, I mean, look, it's bad. And as you have alluded to, and as I agree with 100%, you have to end qualified immunity. If you do not end qualified immunity, then these types of cases will continue. If you hit them in their wallet, it will stop. It just will.
It's unfortunate that that's how you have to do it. But then at least once you do that, it could stop the situation. And then we can address the other things like demilitarizing them. I don't think we need patrol like we have patrol. I want the crime solving aspect. I don't need people patrolling neighborhoods looking to find people to arrest. There's a lot of issues. We need to get rid of the profit motive. There are so many things that need to be dealt with. But yeah, a very good first step is ending qualified immunity. New York just did that, and that is definitely a step in the right direction.
I think there's a possibility of us having a surprise special guest, so keep you posted.
Okay, well, I'm keeping my fingers crossed. So you know what also is fascinating to me? The fact that Derek Chauvin knew that not only was he being recorded by the people, and he was wearing his body cam, like all their body cams were on. Like he did that knowing that he was being recorded. Can you imagine what this man has done when he wasn't being recorded? Because I think that is, and granted, this is by no means a legal argument. It's not anything that I would present as evidence, but for every rat you see, there's 50 you don't. There is no way that somebody who acts like that in front of a camera is not acting worse not in front of a camera. So
well,
people need to think of that.
And you know what? I think that's a great segue into it's a special story, but it's one that we have to talk about. Obviously, what happened to Lieutenant Karan Nazario in Windsor, Virginia, just outside of Norfolk. This is a unbelievable.
Did you see it? I saw it.
Of course. And I got to tell you something. When Gutierrez hit him with the pepper spray the second time, he's still, and again, it just goes to show you that he's a trained soldier in combat. He's somebody who absolutely saw combat because of the fact that he was able, through that kind of pain, if you've ever been pepper sprayed, if anybody knows what that pain is like, it's fact horrible. That he was still able to maintain equilibrium in that instant without rushing out of the car. And it would have given them, they would have just said, "Oh, I thought he was coming at me. Bang, bang, bang." And that would have been it. But for whatever
reason,
reason,
what's interesting is the reason that they were basically that they're going to say that they felt threatened is and I saw his attorney, the lieutenant's attorney was speaking to this. So the sirens went on. He did put on his turn signal, but he wanted to pull over somewhere that was lit. So he drove slowly in front of the officer. And let me tell you, that saved his life. Had he been pulled over on the side of the street, not at a gas station and all that, I don't know that he'd be alive. Now, and they're going to say that
the biggest reason that Gutierrez has been fired, everyone thinks it's because they've been spreading the word and this, and I have no doubt that it played a role, but the biggest reason he was fired is because they were actually able to determine that the cops actually knew that he did have a tag on his back window, and they still proceeded to treat him as a hostile customer. And it's unreal. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, that you don't want to play the race card and you're trying to find any which way to say that this is not a racially motivated stop. He was in his goddamn fatigues, and they still treated him.
Well, and that's something that is what I found to be really kind of profound.
Oh, I guarantee you, those two officers, I guarantee you, they did not serve in the military. Guaranteed.
No, but here's what's so profound about that. It really shows you how the militarization and thugness and how it's all really infiltrated our policing, and how it's come full circle where the militarization of the police department was just essentially used to subdue somebody in the military who wasn't resisting or doing anything wrong. Like, I think that the fact that he held his stuff together as well as he did, and the guy asked him, he's like, what rank did he ask him if he was? And he's like, I'm a lieutenant. And then he sprayed him again.
Maybe
like, are you, I'm just, these people need to have all of their weapons taken away from them because they just don't know what they're doing. They just don't know what they're doing.
You know, the other thing, Jesus, that you have to remember is that not only would he most likely be dead, but you never would have heard about it.
No. The fact that he kept it together, and he wasn't speeding away. He maintained pace with the officer the whole time with his turn signal on until he came to a lit area. And that is absolutely what saved his life. You're right. We would never even be talking about this. And
what's also interesting when you're watching the video is you've got the typical violent, burly, bald, middle-aged, angry cop who, you know, got a massive chip on his shoulder. And then you got the rookie cop who's maybe on the force for a couple of years. He's standing there. I was more concerned about him because he's the guy who is probably never been in a situation like that. And he had his gun cocked like he was ready to unload. And
I know.
So he was not in a defensive position. He was in an offensive position. Because
yeah, it was crazy.
Front leg in a way to basically say,
get out of the car, like,
I shoot. And
yeah.
And Mallory, what you also have to remember is that there are these there are members of the Latino community who identify as white, and that is something that my understanding is that Officer Gutierrez was one who did.
Oh, Mallory, people love to subjugate their own. You know that. That's unfortunately.
And again, part of it's a class struggle, part of it's a power trip. It's a lot of different things. But I got to tell you, on top of the fact that he may very well just hate black people, when he saw him in his fatigues and he knew that he was a lieutenant in the Army, he had what that also shows is that Lieutenant Nazario has bigger cojones than he does.
Oh.
And that's something that really drives them nuts.
Yeah.
I
thought he handled himself with so much restraint and so much dignity. And I gotta tell you, like, he probably could have disarmed that guy and had him in some sort of headlock if he probably wanted to do so. And instead he just totally just was chill.
Well, I think that, and this is a great example of again, we both support the Second Amendment, but there's also something to be said for people who like to use guns as a show of strength. And this is a perfect example of an officer who, if he was a plainclothed officer and Lieutenant Nazario was a plainclothed gentleman, if those two men met on the street, there's no way that Gutierrez would ever get out of line with a guy like that because he would put him down. And that's something that doesn't get talked about enough.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of people who have weapons who are only able to do what they do because they have that weapon. If Derek Chauvin did not have a gun and George Floyd had the opportunity to defend himself,
you don't think 4-1 is good odds?
Hey, especially when one's got his knee on their neck and you got three officers standing around.
And you're handcuffed.
Well, and you're handcuffed. You've got three officers standing in block formation to not allow anybody to stop it. It's like amazing.
Yeah, and 4-1. It was 4-1. Yeah. That whole thing was 4-1.
And the sad thing is that one of the four cops, you could tell, was like, "This is not good. We should not be doing this."
But yet, continue to participate.
And that is the culture of policing that no one wants to talk about. In a normal situation, that one cop, if he didn't have fear of reprisal, whether from his union or because qualified immunity does exist, he very likely would have said, "Get your freaking knee off of his neck," and put him in the back of the squad car. And if he bangs his head against the window 1,000 times, let him break his skull. That's his problem. It's not yours.
That's why this to me was so much more intentional. And I still, for the life of me, have not heard an explanation as to why, once he was handcuffed and in the backseat of the police car, why they took him out of the police car. Like, this is what I don't understand.
And once again, let's say that George Floyd was having some kind of a manic episode. Let's say that he was high on PCP. If that's the case, there are a lot of ways to diffuse that situation. They did not want to diffuse that situation.
No, which is why I think it was way more intentional than second-degree murder. This is my point. Second-degree murder wouldn't be that you then first take him out of the car. It's like, that's very intentional. That's very intentional and very forward thinking. I just the whole thing about it. They didn't get him into that restraint because he was fighting with them and they had to get him down and then they just stayed there. No, they purposefully put him in that position when he was already in the car. So John wants me to explain qualified immunity for people who don't understand. So qualified immunity is something that allows police officers who violate our, civil rights or get in, criminal trouble and then get sued civilly or, after the fact, that money doesn't come from them. It actually comes from the taxpayers. They are immune themselves as individuals from having to be financially accountable for their actions while serving on the police force. So this is one of the things that arguably would be a very good step in reducing the amount of nonsense. If every single one of those officers knew that this was coming out of their pension, they wouldn't be as likely to do what they do. And that's just the sad reality. But you do have to hit people in their wallets. We were talking about that before. So yeah, it is like unlimited immunity. But so and it isn't just for police officers. Other people get different types of qualified immunity. But when we talk about it with law enforcement, we're talking about that they can't be personally liable for their actions financially. Not in a criminal sense, yes, you could, but financially when you're sued civilly. And that's something that, so for example, the city of Minneapolis reached a settlement with George Floyd's family. I want to say it was $27 million. Was that it?
That is
something like that.
That is
it. $27 million. So that $27 million isn't coming out of the Police Benevolent Association or their pensions or their salaries or any of that. That's coming out of the tax dollars of the citizens of Minneapolis. And if you were to end qualified immunity, then it would come out of the police officers themselves. They would be personally liable, and you would find them having to be giving up their homes and whatever if they couldn't afford to pay their bills. So that would be what would happen.
And like I said, you wouldn't even have any instances. The second.
Yeah, and Mallory makes a good point, right? And the city and county, right? So the Minneapolis is paying for his defense. Well, I think it's coming from the union. I think that even though he was fired, I believe that the union is still handling all of this. But yeah, the civil fine for sure comes out of the tax dollars from the people of the city.
And what you have to remember is, and I think it's 2 states now, New York and New Mexico, I believe.
Is that I know that there's at least 2, but this is what needs to start happening.
And look, you got to give a lot of credit to Ro Khanna. He's been at the forefront of this issue. He really has been hammering away at this, to his credit. And it really does make a difference when you are willing to put yourself out there, because that is an issue. Let me tell you, even with a lot of the Democrats, this is where, when people say that Ro Khanna doesn't go far enough, he really does make a difference, because very few people ever challenge the police, ever. And the fact that he's willing to go out there and use his platform in front of hundreds of thousands of people and say, yeah, we got to end qualified immunity. This is a very serious problem, and the police are not going to be held accountable at the level that they must be held accountable at until that is removed.
Yeah.
We have, for those of you who do not know Broward County very well, we do have a sheriff who runs this county, and he kind of runs it, like a bull in a china shop. He does things that, there's been a number of instances where, there have been some serious legal issues. There was a massive cover-up in Sunrise when a young boy was killed. And
Damian Martin, and they still haven't released the information, and they're still sitting on it. It's been 2 years now.
And part of the reason why they won't release that information is because they know that there will be massive legal ramifications to that end. So when you have things like qualified immunity in place, we are never going to solve that problem in terms of having, legitimate policing in these communities.
But I will also say that if we get rid of qualified immunity, that would be quite a blow to the police unions. And
100%.
And we need to be chipping away at that power very significantly. And I maintain my idea that we take the money we defund the police, and the money we take from that, we give to the firefighters and the teachers. So that was my theory, especially for people who don't subscribe to MMT and you think it's a budget. Let's take, from pile A and put it in piles B and C.
Well, the first great guest that we had on the podcast in terms of our labor series was Jason Smith, the head of the firefighters union. But what's awesome about our firefighters union here in Broward is that it's actually a two-part union where it's firefighters and EMT. Those are also people that need to be getting more support than we are. And again, we are not anti-police. We are pro-police, but you know what? We're pro-police accountability. And that is the way everybody should be. And even when we put out the social post about what happened to Lieutenant Nazario, it was overwhelmingly supported, but there's always going to be a couple of yahoos that will jump on and suggest that, police are doing a great job and you're just defending
And they're entitled to think that. I am not pro-police. I'm pro-firefighter and pro-EMT and pro-teacher. I'm not pro-police. I think that entire field and industry has just been so filled with just nefariousness and rot, and it's just militarized. And no, I don't support that. And however, like I always say, I think of all policing, there's two sides of it. There's the patrol side, there's the investigation side. Sure. I do believe in having investigative policing. I do want crime solved. I do want police actually serving the community. But no, I don't like people just out driving around looking to arrest people and fill up bodies for profit.
Well, you have said many a times before that there is, in almost every precinct in the country, massive backlogging in case files that have never been dealt with, sometimes going back decades, I suppose. So that would seem to me, but again, this is one of the reasons why not a lot of people become police officers to do paperwork. That's the truth. And I think if a lot of cops knew that let's put it this way. What would you say percentage-wise paperwork is part of the job for police officers?
Probably most of it, though. Really? Do you know that if you were to look up, go ahead, Google it, top 10 most dangerous jobs in this country, police officer isn't in the top 10. And so I'm kind of tired of that their lives are always threatened and their lives are always at risk. And no, that's just not the case. That's not based on actual facts and numbers. That does not support that whatsoever. Iron workers have a much more dangerous job than police officers. Commercial fishermen, loggers. I mean, there are
loggers. Talk about a dangerous job.
Wire workers like that are the cable guys. I am telling you, police officers is not in the top 10 most dangerous jobs in this country. And yet you would think, and that again is based on a certain amount of propaganda, the strength of the police unions, that their job is the hardest, most dangerous job in the world. No, it isn't. Not if you look at science and numbers. And I'm just, crab fishermen. Here's a good point. Most police that die on the job is in traffic accidents. I believe that, but that could still be seen as a risk of their job. Roofers, there's a good one. Yes. Point being that I'm so tired of that.
I love how everyone in the chat is just well aware of, being a police officer definitely comes with its risks, but there's a lot of other jobs that are equally, if not more riskier. So
way more. And honestly, I think that in many cases, the firefighters have a much more dangerous job in terms of even when their life is not at risk in the moment, the chemicals and the fumes and the stuff that they inhale, which makes them sicker, younger, is way worse. And they don't have the same union power that the police do.
No. And and listen, we love John Stewart, and the work that he has done for the 9/11 firefighters is amazing. But the truth is, it's the firefighters that are having that problem. The police are not.
No.
And that just goes to show you.
And not just from 9/11, from everything.
Of course. Absolutely. But it is a much more riskier job, even if the risks are not as consistent. But then again, like I said, it's a job, and if you think about it in a lot of ways, if we're being honest, being a police officer has ache and ties to the military-industrial complex, because we are living in a police state, and we are living in a time where, you know, when we were canvassing during the campaign, and I remember we were canvassing, I want to say this was in, I think it might have been Sunrise, actually. And we were canvassing in Sunrise, and we were noticing that the police cars were from Hallandale.
Oh yeah, every neighborhood is like that, or Miami Lakes, or wherever.
People are not being policed by people that they know, because if you know certain people, that changes the whole dynamic of how you would look at somebody. If you're approaching a car that's been speeding or going erratic, but it happens to be in the same area that you live in, odds are, if you're a police officer, you're going to know who that person is. So you're not going to approach their car with this inherent fear that, oh my God, could this person have a weapon? No, likelihood is they're out of their mind right now, and I got to calm them down. But if you are a police officer who works in Miami, but you live 40 minutes, 45 minutes north, what do you think is likely to happen? Probably not much good. And that's a very big problem. So community policing is also an issue that doesn't get addressed enough. You should be.
And I feel like this is very intentional. I want to say it's intentional. I don't think it's a matter of just coincidence or happenstance that where people can and cannot get jobs. I think it's intentional. I think it is designed to create a much more of a barrier between law enforcement and people, despite their photo ops and talking points to the contrary. I think that it facilitates more divisiveness. I think that it is very intentional. And because you can make a concerted effort to have law enforcement serve their communities. This is not something that can't be done. Therefore, to me, it's intentional. And I don't think that they all talk about it. They all say things like, yeah, we need to get community policing. And, you know, they say all these catchphrases, but they're not going to actually do anything about it. And so, especially not with this sheriff. Especially not here with this sheriff. So, you know, I don't see anything good happening from that. I think
it's interesting how it is in our own backyard. And look, you know, Jen is very friendly. I wouldn't say very friendly, but definitely friendly with our former sheriff. And, you know, he wasn't without, obviously, his flaws. And unfortunately, he did take the brunt of responsibility for what happened in Parkland. Right or wrong, anyone could debate that. But he was not somebody who had a reputation for enforcing law in a way that made people afraid to be in their communities. And unfortunately, the sheriff that we have now is the type of sheriff that would very likely, I hate to say this, but is very likely to employ the type of police officers that have been caught up in the certain instances that have happened in Minneapolis, that have happened in Virginia. And the reason why your sheriff is such an important job is because it is somewhat of a hierarchical approach. If the person at the top treats law enforcement as a cowboy type situation, well, how do you think his subordinates are going to conduct themselves?
Well, yeah, and for people who don't realize, our sheriff is basically the poster child for shoot first and ask questions later. Like if you were to picture somebody with their story, their history, their background, that is what you would think of. I'm sorry, but it is. So, you know, and there's also a myriad of investigations going on against that person right now as well.
And of course, these types of things happen whether anybody wants to talk about it, but there's a lot of politics that go into this type of thing. You know, politics is a very big part of why certain sheriffs get elected, certain sheriffs don't, why certain ones get pushed aside, why certain ones stay for a long, long time. Let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody knows that Jeffrey Epstein was involved in very nefarious activities, and a lot of very wealthy and powerful people on Palm Beach were involved with that for many, many years. Well, guess what? The sheriff of Palm Beach County, who has overseen that for decades now, he's still the sheriff. That's not a mistake. Not even.
It's an old boys club, and we're not in it.
Listen, George Carlin. If only, George died at 71. I mean, look, he was not a baby, but man, if only he could have hung around for another 20 years.
Yeah, I don't know that he would. I don't know what he would. His head would have exploded with the Trump stuff, probably. But
I don't think that is what he would have actually read that situation very well. I think his head would have exploded knowing that somebody like Bernie Sanders came along, was willing to really challenge the machine, especially in 2016, and seeing what they were willing to do to him, to railroad him, to maintain the power vacuum. And that's, again, he would have been.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.